Welcome to this episode of Growth TV. I'm Carolyn Vallejo, and we're welcoming back Jordan Zapotechne, Chief Revenue Officer at EPG. And joining us today is also Vikas Shah, Chief Revenue Officer of LSQ. They're joining us today to talk about supply chain financing. Vikas, we're going to start with you. Tell me a little bit about how the current supply chain crisis is shaping businesses' supply chain financing needs.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here and super excited to have this conversation with both yourself and Jordan. The current economic crisis, especially around supply chain, has essentially driven a massive interest by businesses to optimize their accounts payables. Accounts payables impact suppliers. Suppliers in today's environment are essentially asking for prepayments or early payments. It used to be a nice to have, but it's a must have for corporates right now because they want to make sure that the suppliers get paid in time, in many cases upfront, to be able to secure supplies. It impacts their inventory. Companies are now seeing an increased inventory buildup. Back in the day, there used to be a concept around just-in-time inventory that has shifted to just-in-case inventory. If you don't have inventory in place, you would not be able to drive sales and service the demand, and that impacts the revenue profile of a lot of these companies. So what we're seeing right now as a result of the supply chain crisis, a massive demand for supply chain financing solutions that helps businesses streamline accounts payables, make sure they're able to drive payment certainty for their suppliers, in many cases, give them an option to get paid early or even provide them upfront prepayments.
Mm-hmm. Jordan, what are you seeing from an EPG member perspective? Is any of this resonating?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, our members are mostly mid-market private equity firms and the companies they invest in. So those mid-market companies were hit hard during the pandemic, which is, we're talking about the supply chain crisis that really was kind of enacted in 2020 when things got really, really tight globally for shipping. And so what that did is it created two scenarios that are putting a really tough strain on working capital for companies. One is the increased delay in shipping times. So shipping times were extended, in some cases 30 to 45 days, sometimes months with delays at the port. And at the same time, the costs of shipping skyrocketed. And so what that is doing for companies when they're trying to focus on available capital is they're having a longer time period between ordering a product and selling a product. So there's a strain on their capital in that way. And at the same time, for that shipping cost, they're paying 300 to 400% more than they used to. And so the capital that they used to plan and allocate towards shipping expenses, they're paying more and paying sooner and longer than they're realizing revenue back into the company. And so it's put a huge strain on available capital. And as Vikas said, it's one of those things that as a business, you can't afford not to order the inventory. You can't afford not to bring things in. And so a lot of companies have felt almost held hostage by the global supply chain issue. And there's only so much capital to go around. So optimizing it is really the only way that you can survive when those two things are happening at the same time.
It sounds like a really challenging environment today. So Vikas, considering everything that's going on, what do you recommend in terms of the characteristics of supply chain financing solutions that businesses should be looking for?
Number one, making sure that the provider is able to provide suppliers payment certainty. Suppliers don't have payment certainty in today's market. They are withholding product. They are not allowing products to get on the boat, to get on the trucks. That impacts inventory, impacts the entire supply chain. So just making sure that supply payment certainty is top of mind for most businesses, and they know exactly when they're going to get paid. And that experience is of paramount importance. The second is capital and funding stability. So you could have a great partner and you could get some capital to help you alleviate the pain on both inventory and supplier payments. But what if that capital source dries up? What if that capital source now all of a sudden has credit restrictions or other covenants or other limitations and is no more able to fund your business? So when you're conducting due diligence selecting a solution provider, you want to make sure that the partner has enough capital and capital stability over a long period of time, because a lot of businesses solve for cost of capital, the pricing of the capital. And that's of course important. You want to make sure you source the cheapest source of capital, but they essentially forget the stability side of things. So I think that's a very important characteristic that most businesses should actively consider. And the third one, which is my favorite and probably the most important one that a lot of businesses tend to gloss over, is just credit and risk management capabilities. So when you're providing a solution, it needs to come with a very holistic credit and risk management point of view, because you're essentially partnering up with a company that is looking out for you, is looking at signals in the market in terms of risk across your supply chain, risk in terms of credit profiles of the counterparties that you're dealing with. And you want to work with a partner that has that expertise in-house and is able to bring all of that to bear as part of the overall working capital solution when it comes to credit and risk management.
Mm-hmm. So, Jordan, how are things like interest rate hikes or even a possible recession going to impact businesses' supply chain financing strategy?
Yeah, that's a good point, Carolyn. And I think it's important to think about that question from the point of view of the shipping situation as well. So what the carriers feel and believe about this. And I think it's important when you think back to the 2 points I made about extended shipping times and rising shipping costs. The thing that has remained the same during that period of time is the fact that the carriers want to be paid at the same terms they agreed to and what's in your contract. And that's usually 7 to 14 days. And what's important about that is that it's not based on a company's credit worthiness for the carriers. For them, they see your extended terms or the terms they provide, as well as the ability to pay by credit card. That's, instead of it being a credit option, it's factored into the price negotiation. So carriers will use that as an opportunity to say, if you want to pay by credit card, or if you want more than 14-day terms, your discounts on shipping are going to be less and you're going to pay more. And so that's really not a viable solution. It's not really a benefit to say, I get better terms, but I pay 20% more on the shipping. It's not a solution. And so I think when you think about the supply chain crisis and also rate hikes, it makes credit card payment with the shipping carriers specifically difficult in many cases. And it also makes it hard to extend terms if your shipping times are delayed and your shipping expenses are higher. You need a financing solution to be able to get your supplier paid on time, but give you the working capital and the extended terms that allow you to survive and function.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're seeing is very much what Jordan mentioned, is that we want to be able to provide more levers or more optionality in terms of potential solutions to both shippers and corporates in this environment. A couple of things that we've noticed in this market environment, we've seen solution providers that are able to provide financing at handover at the port of origin. That trend is going to accelerate because it essentially alleviates the stress on the shipper or the supplier. They get paid right away as soon as that inventory has been handed over to the corporate. No longer they're liable, for the time those goods are essentially in transit. So an ability for a provider to provide financing for goods in transit is going to be a huge differentiator in this market because that time is getting extended as we speak, and it's also becoming unpredictable. So typically, when it used to take 20 to 30 days for goods to arrive, for example, at one of the ports in North America, that time has almost doubled, and it's unpredictable in some cases. And obviously, once it arrives at a port in North America, it also has to go to a distribution center or a warehouse location, which is ground transportation. That adds additional time and capital to the overall shipping cost. I think the other lever is AR financing, accounts receivables, potentially helping suppliers and shippers be able to finance their receivables, not just against one corporate buyer, but against multiple corporate buyers. So a solution provider that is able to provide both supply chain financing and AR financing combination is going to stand out. We're also seeing in a rising interest rate environment, solution providers who are able to provide fixed pricing are standing out as well. So that provides more certainty for corporates who want to lend, who want to borrow, and then for lenders being able to obviously charge a premium for fixed pricing. But all in all, I think it's a huge benefit because of pricing certainty. And then finally, credit insurance cost is playing into the equation as well. What we're seeing is that because of better and more financing solutions being available now, shippers and suppliers are able to reduce the cost of credit insurance. They no longer have to carry a huge amount of credit insurance against the buyers or the customers that they're doing business with, because they're able to accelerate their payments and close out that outstanding invoice and thereby reduce their exposure against those customers.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, Vikas and Jordan, thank you so much for joining Growth TV today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Caroline.